listening to them. So first or second intermission, when Cliff started off the stand, when Mr. McMillan hollered at him, and he came over to the table. I don't know if he remembered the old man or not. I was just trying to be nice, but he might remember. Anyway, he came over to the table, and he told Cliff that this is little Clyde. He said, he plays the guitar and sings. And Cliff said, well, we'd get him up to play something with us. Well, I fell under the table. You know, here's a kid, 12, 13 years old, going to play with Cliff Brunner. And I remember this as well. He turned around and he said, you have any guitar? And I said, no. He said, Buddy, which was Buddy Duhan, the singer in Cliff's band, kind of right-hand guy. He said, Buddy, don't we have an extra guitar out there in the trailer? And Buddy said, yeah. He said, well, go get it for little Clyde here. And went out there, I'll never forget it. He comes back in there and he had a flat top Martin guitar. Best one I'd ever touched. And when they got back up on the bandstand, sure enough, he called me over there. And of course, I stood over to the side. He didn't know what I was going to do or anything. And I stayed over there and played what I knew of the tunes. And in the band that night, well, Mansell Turney was on the piano, and I guess Richard Prine would have been the drummer, and steel player was named Johnny Gibson, and Billy Claiborne was the banjo player. And Buddy Duhan, of course, the singer, and Cliff on fiddle. And I remember the first tune we played was Live and Let Live. That was the first tune. And man, I know this song, you know. I know Live and Let Live. Wally and Gene had put it out a couple of years before. But I didn't know it the way Cliff played it. I didn't know it that way. And man, right off the second chord, I had not gone to that chord before. And so I impressed, to say the least, and they was real nice to me, especially Billy Claiborne was.
So what did he do? It was different.
Well, he what it was, old tune at that time, it wasn't old tune. Live and let live, don't break my heart, Cliff, but live and let live, don't break. Boy, what is that, you know? And it wasn't. It was.
Yeah.
I was impressed with that. So anyway, they was real nice to me, all the guys in the band, you know, being nice to a little kid. So anyway, when I got home that night, I got to find that chord. So I got my little guitar and went in the bathroom. Mom and Daddy was asleep. Went in there and shut the door, and I hunted around there till I found that B7 chord, you know. And anyway, and that was my first encounter was with Cliff and the guys, and then I went on back to my Playland Park thing, which was pretty regular with Patsy and the Buckaroos.
So you're playing, going to school and playing Patsy and the Buckaroos in Beaumont, and that's when you met Shelly Alley, right?
Well, what happened was Patsy and the Buckaroos went on there every day at 4 o'clock. And I could only be on a radio program with them on Saturdays if school was in.
You ready? Okay, so you can only play with Patsy and the Buckaroos on Saturdays.
Yeah, and on as far as the radio program, of course, I'd go play with them that night at the park. But school being in, I couldn't catch the radio program during the week. But at any rate, I'd get home a lot of times in time to hear them on the radio, and I'd listen, and they'd plug the Playland part, and that I was going to be out there with them, this and that. So I get home this day and turned the radio program on, and Patsy said, we got a special guest with us today, and said his name is Shelly Lee Alley, and he used to play with and recorded with Jimmy Rogers, and then he had his own band for years called Shelly Lee Alley and the Alley Cats. Well, I'm listening to that, you know, and said, so he got him to do a couple of tunes on the show, and said tonight he's going to be with us out at Playland Park. Well, I was going to be there too. So that's good, I'll get to meet him. So sure enough, got out at Playland Park that night, and Shelly was there, and he looked real sharp and everything, so he got up and sounded good, and he did, I may have done Traveling Blues, I don't know, he did 2 or 3 of his songs, and added fiddle to the group, which helped. And so that would have been on Friday. So the next day at the radio program, well, he was down there at the program, and I was down there to play with him too, you know. So anyway, we played Playland Park for a few times, and then we took a break one night, and he said, you know, I'm back over here in Beaumont now, and he said, I'm trying to get the Alley Cats back together, get a band together, and he said, I'd like to know if you would like to go with me. And said, I'm going to put my band back together and try to work in this area. And I was impressed that he'd asked me to, you know, which meant I'd quit patching the buckaroos. And so that's how I got started with Shelley. And then, of course, later on after that, well, Mom and my dad divorced, and she married Shelley, and he became my stepdad. But at any rate, he got a band together over there, and man, was older guys.
Well, who had been in that first band he got together?
Well, anybody that knew two chords was a hero to me.
Yeah.
I was impressed with it, good or bad, just as long as
Mm-hmm.
they played something. So he got over there, and word got out, you know, that he was going to start booking over there and get a radio program. So he hired a guy called, his last name, steel guitar player, his last name was Kuhn, and he had a drummer named Como, and I think Kenneth Cox and myself and him, and some guy named Oliver was the other fiddle player, and we're going to rehearse. And you don't get into the funny part here.
Yeah.
Okay. To get into him, it's got to get funny.
Yeah, it's got
of course.
to.
Well, anyway, he said, what we're going to do this is the first rehearsal. He said, it'll be tomorrow. He said, you come up to my room where I'm staying, and we'll get together and rehearse with those guys. Well, I got up there and nobody was there but him. So we go over to his brother's house. His brother named Ray. He had a little bit bigger place. He had a bigger one room. And we go over there, and well, nobody rehearsed but me and him. So man, we played for hours. We played all the songs he wrote, and then he got out other people's songs and went to playing those, reading them, you know. He was that much into playing, which suited me fine. So at any rate, he finally got the band together, so I think the following Sunday or two.
Well, let's finish that story, though. Because the reason he's playing, because it had to do with he was hungry but he didn't have no money.
Okay. Well, anyway, at the time he'd been out of playing for a long time. I think he'd been sick or something, and I didn't know, and of course I didn't have any money. So man, we played on up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the evening, and I'm wondering, man, does this guy ever eat? You know? And I think he was hoping I'd get up and go home because he didn't have any money at that time, and his brother apparently wasn't going to feed us anything.
Except ice.
So finally he just couldn't stand it anymore, and he said, well, let's go down here to Enterprise Cafe. He said, I believe I could have a sandwich, and probably we could both have a steak, I guess. And I said, oh, okay. I didn't have any money. I am a 13-year-old kid, you know, without any money. And I didn't know he didn't either. I thought he was a big star, and so we get down there to Enterprise Cafe, and he orders a ham sandwich, and it's cut in half, and he wanted to know if I wanted the other half. Well, yeah, if you insist. And that was my first dealings with him and his financial situation at the time. But like I say, with him, everything got funny. Anyway, so in a couple of weeks, we had a rehearsal with the full band. So we go with this guy's house, and about six of us, I guess. Man, I couldn't wait to go. I was ready to be over at sun up. Daddy dropped me off over there, and we was going to rehearse the program. So this is like about 2 o'clock in the evening on Sunday. So he rehearsed this song, most of them his, and he wrote down all the keys for all the guys, you know. So the next morning was going to be our first radio program, and it was a 6 a.m. show. Because all these guys in the band all worked at the shipyard, and they all had to be to work at 7. They were all working as well as playing part-time. So get down there to KRIC, man, I'm down there like about 5:30 ready to play. Done knew what we was going to play and everything. I was set. So here comes the band in. They're all set, got on hard hats, and this because they're going to the shipyard or whatever. And Shelley, he comes down there, and he had just woke up, he overslept. And his hair was down his face and this and that. He gets down there, just walked in the door in time to go on the air. He had not said a word. So, you know, when you first get up in the morning, your voice is a little lower than it is 2 o'clock the evening before. So, just as he walked in the door, just about, we went on there, and he had not spoke a word. So every tune that we played, he was standing on his tiptoes trying to reach it because his voice was way down here, and the keys was way up here, and it was It was a mess. The very first roll. That should have told me something.
You knew. You knew. That was a clue.
But it didn't. So we went on there with. He should have been singing everybody at least a whole tone higher, you know. And here he was just a voice way down here. And like most things with him, it was a disaster. So anyway, after that, well, he dropped back to just me and him. And wasn't too long after that, him and my mother married. And anyway, they got married, and the band played in Benton, Louisiana. That's where they got married, Benton, Louisiana. I was not with them. And they
Well, this has been about, what, 44?
Yeah. And they went over there to play in Benton, Louisiana. He booked a job, and he had a band with him. I did not go. And him and my mother got married before the dance. And she was telling me all about this. Well, being around that many musicians, it was new to her. And she wanted to do the right thing and this and that. So they played this great big old hall out of Benton someplace. And Shelley had all his music sitting up on the stand. He had his music stand set up and all of his songs he'd written, you know, going to read a bunch of it. She sitting over the side of the table, she would tell me, and it was hot in that place. No place was air conditioned then. They had a great big old fan in the end of the building, suction fan or something. So she's sitting over there, and she just became Miss Allie. And they were playing along there, and the guitar player said, "Miss Allie, would you mind me looking?" The fan had a cord come down there to it, and there was a plug, AC plug, laying there. "Miss Allie, would you mind plugging that fan in?" And she said, "Well, sure." And she plugged it in and blew everything out in the building. Blowed the fuse, him trying to sing, the PA set went out, everything, and he turned around and he said, "What the heck did you do that for?" And of course that didn't embarrass her very much. No. Anyway, and you want to really get into it,
sure.
Do you?
Yeah.
Anyway, so when they got back to Beaumont, after she lived through that, and they booked a job at the ABC Park in Liberty, Texas. And I'm back in school, and I'm still living out at Daddy's because I couldn't get involved in playing all that much during the week. So you got a job at the ABC Park in Liberty. And he didn't drive, never had a car, never learned how to drive. So a guy came in, and they was riding with Mama and my mother, and him was riding with this fella. And they start back at the job about 2 o'clock in the morning on Highway 90, somewhere between Liberty and Nome, and the car breaks down. And he just went all to pieces, and he jumped out in the road, and here comes a Greyhound bus. He could see down the road, said Beaumont on the front of it, and he was a Greyhound bus. He jumps out in front of this bus and waves it down. And she done figured out how crazy he was about that fiddle and briefcase, and she's getting that out of the car. And the bus is stopped, and the driver opens the door, and he's standing up in this whale there to get on the bus, and she's still getting his fiddle and stuff out of the car. And he says, "Phyllis," her name's Velma, of course. "Phyllis, Margie, Aline," and he couldn't come to think of her name. And everybody on the bus is rolling. She said, and I was so embarrassed to death. And I knew if I didn't come out with that fiddle, it was going to take long. He'd really have a fit. And he'd been married before, and that's his ex-wife's name that he's calling. And her name is Valma, and he called all these other wives' names. And she said, we got on the bus, everybody was in the floor rolling, and she was so embarrassed. And so anyway, not too long after that, well, he still got the band thing going because I'm still in school. And I could go down and play on a radio program on Saturday or something. So he books a job over at Port Neches, Nederland, over there. So there was a guitar player in Beaumont named Fats Beard. And Fats was a good guitar player. I don't know if anybody knew where he learned to play at, but Fats was 18 or 19 years old, and I thought he was 45, and that's how old he looked. I guarantee he looked like he was well in his 40s. Come find out he was 18 or 19 years old. But he was under the influence of a lot of things, several things. And they played this place over there, and Fats was in the band. So they played up the first intermission, and Chevy said, "Fats, when we get back up there," he said, "You know, there's an old song called Waiting for Ships That Never Come In." Yeah, Shelley, yeah, Shelley. And he said, well, when we get back up there, he said, I won't open with that. And of course it goes, I'm waiting for ships that never come in, watching and waiting in vain. And then it has a recitation in there, which he was going to do. And the recitation goes, in other words, he's waiting for his ships to come in, he thinks they are. And then whatever happens, his ships turn, and his ship didn't come in. It's still hard luck, you know. So he said, Fats hadn't heard him do it. He said, I'm going to sing it all the way through, Fats. And he said, Dean, I want you to play the melody behind me with the guitar. Da-dee-dee-da, da-dee-dee-dum-dum, da-dee-da-da-dee-dee-dum, while I give this recitation. Okay, Shelley.